Hi, and welcome to the Notepad Show. In today's episode, we're going to go over CG integration in a way that you might have not seen before using Renderman and Houdini. We're going to be recreating something like this or anything else. You can put anything in here and it will match the camera that you took the photograph with. So let's get started. There is a little bit of prep work to do, so I'd like to go over that first. First, you're going to need a camera to capture or record your HDR, or if you want to use it, however you choose to get your HDR and your backplate, that is up to you. I happen to have this camera, and it takes amazing 360 HDR photographs. The camera doesn't do it built in. You have to go into Photoshop and do that. And there are tutorials on how to make an HDR. That's not what this tutorial is about. But you're going to need an HDR and a backplate. A shortcut and probably an easier way to get some practice in is to just go to a website like this one, which is Polyhaven. And you can download an HDR and then a backplate that goes with that HDR. This particular author has amazing HDRs. I've used one down here. I've used this one. I've used a few. But you're going to need an HDR and a backplate. I will be including the HDR of the basketball court and the backplate of the basketball court, but you will need both for this workflow to work. All right? The other thing you'll need is you'll need a program called FSPY. This is a program, it's open source, that will take a still image and allow you to map the camera. Then we'll be able to take the data from this program into your DCC, whether it be Maya, Blender, or Houdini, and use that data when creating the CG camera. You'll need the plugin as well. So there's the program. You can download it here. And then you also need the plugin. And depending on what DCC you use, you'll know how to install the plugin. I'll be including instructions on how to install the plugin or the HDA for Houdini, but there are plenty of instructions on how to use it in Blender and in Maya. Okay. And also here's where the Maya plugin is. So let's get started. So I'm going to assume that you've already installed FSPY and that you've already installed the plugin. So we don't need this anymore. Okay. So let's bring up FSPY. And the first thing we have to do is let's bring in the image, the backplate. So you bring in the backplate into FSPY. In this case, I labeled it clearly. It's a basketball court PNG. There it is. We're going to maximize this a little bit. All right. And now we are going to if you've not done camera matching before, it's a matter of taking these perspective lines and lining them up with elements in your shot that are straight lines that go into a Z direction, a X direction, or a Y direction. In this case, we're going to be using X and Z. So we're going to be staying pretty much here. So for the Z, and if you hold down the Shift key, you can zoom in. We're going to line up a perspective line with the basketball court line. We're going to do it one more time in a different area. Here, we'll probably do it here. It's good enough. Okay. And then we do the same thing for the x-axis. We're not going to worry about lens distortion or anything that. This is for look dev. This isn't intended. This tutorial is not for like a final shot, but it's for look dev to get a quick and dirty integration of CG with the backplate. Okay. We're going to do it one more time. Maybe we'll use a different plane, and yeah, we're lined up. We have to flip it. There we go. Now we take the axis origin and we get a rough origin. This point would be what would be considered 0, 0 according to the camera. All right. Now, if you move this around, you'll see for the most part, it's lined up perfect. Look at the blue line, the Z line. No matter where I put it. Okay, that's how we know we got a good, and that's it. Like, that's all there is to it. It really is that simple to line up your axes. And now we're going to check this little checkbox for focal length and just see if we're close. Now, when you're, I'm going to bring up the Internet Explorer for a second. And I have a website. I'll put it in the description as well. It has real world camera information, physical camera information of sensor size and crop factor. These numbers are going to be very, very important for the export of the FSPY data. And also further in the tutorial, you'll see where it's also used. My camera was not listed. I have an iPhone 12. But if you look, here's the iPhone 13. It's 7.6 millimeter by 5.7 millimeter. Mine is 7.05 millimeter by 4.77 millimeter. I had to do some research and find out what the sensor size was on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So we're going to need that information, and we're going to need the focal length as well. Now, I know my focal length is 5.1, which ironically is also the crop factor of 5.1. Here on the iPhone 13, it's a crop factor of 4.6. So knowing the camera information for the backplate, what you're going to be shooting your backplate. Now, in that website that I showed you, the HDR Haven, they'll include that. They include that. If you look at the raw file, and you can download the raw file, it will have all that information for you. So it tells you what camera was used in the shooting of it. So it's very easy to get that info. Okay? But that's hypercritical. So I'm going to put in 7.05 in the first field. And you have to hit enter for the setting to take place, and 4.70 in the second field. Now, I said it was 5.1. There is some like rounding and stuff, so it's really close. It's 5.4, 0.3 difference in millimeter. It's a third of a millimeter. Like, that's really small. So it's almost like a rounding error. But once you have this information, first of all, you can save your project. In this case, we're going to save it here, and we're going to save it as a tutorial. So the project is saved with the image. So if you ever need to recall it in FSPY, you can do so. But the next important thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be exporting the camera data to a JSON file. And this is going to be read by Maya or Houdini. The other option is to record it as a Blender file, which you can do if you have Blender. You don't have to do this extra step that I'm about to show if you have Blender. And there are tutorials on how to use FSPY with Blender all over the internet, so that shouldn't be a problem finding that info. So here we go. We're going to export the JSON file now. And that's all that is needed for the prep. We have everything that we need. We have the HDR, which is needed, the backplate, the FSPY camera data that's going to be required, and we already have sensor information for the camera that you used to shoot the image. So now it's time to go into Houdini and actually put it all together. So I have a blank project here. The first thing we're going to do is, if you've installed the plugin correctly, again, you'll have to read the README file to know how to do it in Houdini, but it's however you load your customized HDAs. I have mine in an OTLS subdirectory in the Houdini user directory. But once you have the plugin loaded, you can just type in FSPY, and it's called FSPY Importer. It's just a simple HDA, but this HDA is going to bring in the camera data. Right now it puts a camera at the default 00, and we're about to import the data. First thing we need to do on my particular camera, I know that it thinks that the focal length is 5.4, roughly 0.2. And now we need to open up that JSON file. So I'm opening up with a text editor. You just want to open up the JSON file with the text editor. And I'm in Linux, of course, but this whole workflow works in Windows as well. And I'm going to select the entire internal parts of this text file, copy the actual text, and then paste it into this field. Yeah, you're going to be pasting an entire text file right into a small field here. I know it seems weird, but it's definitely what we need to do. We're then going to bring in a background image. This is just for making sure everything is lined up and set up properly. So we're going to bring in the image, and my image is the basketball court. It's a PNG file. It's the same PNG file that we used before, and then we're going to go into the camera. And there it is. So this is just in the viewport we're seeing this. This will not be in the render. We're going to have to do other things. But it's the first important step that we have to do. We have to make sure that the CG camera and the real world camera are matched up, and they are matched up perfectly within mathematical rounding errors. All right? So we have the camera. Now we can lay down a grid and really sort of see where things are. And there we are. I'm going to make the grid a little bit bigger. There we go. Awesome. So the next step in this tutorial is we need to make the grid a holdout, a shadow catcher, as Renderman calls it, holdout, but it's a shadow catcher. So that's the next step in the process. Before I do that, I am going to put down some kind of a test object here. We'll put down the And I'll put down the shader ball this time. Scale it up to 4. Rotate it on. And there we go. So, to do the holdout, simply click Add Spare Parameter, makes a Renderman tab, go to Trace Attributes, and just check off Holdout. There is a toolbar icon that can do it. I like to create the spare parameter because you never know if you'll ever need it for something related to Houdini, like some kind of a trace set or something. So I like to do the spare parameter and then check off holdout. So we are in a holdout. I'm going to actually add the spare parameter for the shader ball as well, just in case. So we're good there. All right. And now if we create the ROP, so now we have a ROP. One of the first things I have to do is, by default, Renderman is looking for a camera in OBJ called cam1. I have to tell it to use cam_FSPY. And there's nothing. And that is expected because we have to do a few things, but I wanted to just give you an idea of nothing gets rendered yet. We're now going to go into the first step, and the first kind of trick. We are going to create what's called an image display filter. While we're at it, we're also going to create a shadow display filter. Okay? So in the image display filter, we need to, what this image display filter does is it allows you to attach a clean plate, a background image, so that it's renderable by Renderman. That's all it does. It's almost, it's like it's just what it is. We also have to give it the shadow AOV, the holdout AOV, which is called, by default, it's called shadow. There's a little gotcha that we have to worry about a little further down. But right now, we have to make sure we have the shadow AOV set. And in shadow display filter, we have to make sure we have the occluded pass, the unoccluded pass, and the shadow AOV as well. And these AOVs are right here. Okay? But there's an issue with the denoiser, and I'll have to show you. I'll pause the video and I'll add. There's these passes are simply just LPEs, and we sort of have to like add them manually, and I'll do so in a second. But I think for this example, it's not a big deal because we're not going to do denoising. We're just going to do everything in the viewport. But we're going to pay attention and find a workaround, because I don't think we can use these checkboxes when we do the denoise. There is an issue there. Okay? So we're going to create them manually. There's no difference in us creating them manually versus here, but something internal in Renderman is broken when using denoising, hence why we have to do that. Okay. So we have the image display filter with the image, and we have the shadow display filter. Let's render now again. Still not showing up. And the reason it isn't is we haven't pointed the display filters where they need to go. So let's do that. I keep stringing you guys along. I feel bad, but there's a reason. I want you to really understand why we're doing what we're doing. So we have to, in the filter tab, we have to point it to the display filters that we created. Now, when we render, it will render the background. But the background is backwards. It's in reverse. Why? What's going on there? Well, if we go to the image display filter, I don't know if this is a bug, but it's something that I've had to do since I learned this technique about 4 years ago. That is, we have to set a -1 on the X scale. And when we do that, it reverses the background plate to be proper. So you have to set a -1 on scale X. Okay? So here we have an image. Now, we don't have any shadow or anything yet because we haven't actually created the light. I'm going to make this smaller for the rest of this video just because it's way too big. All right. And we're going to resize the camera to about half. There we go. So let's add a light to the scene. So we're going to add a Pixar dome light. And I recorded a dome light and already converted the texture. This is the dome light I recorded. You'll download the backplate in the HDR. So I'm just downloading the TEX file. I don't have to do any kind of color space thing. I also have to orient the HDR. If you look, the door is a different door. You can't see it off camera, but I have to rotate the HDR 180 degrees, and now the backplate and the HDR are lined up. Just a 180 degree thing. It's something you have to do. Okay? We definitely do not want to render the camera as visible. That's what the image display filter is for. It's going to be our backplate. That's why we have it. And if I render now, we should see some kind of a shadow. And we do. There's a little bit of shadow there. There's not much of a texture. I don't have anything. I'll put like a, I don't know. You know what? I'll put metal. I'll put a steel one. Okay. And I'll apply subdivision. Awesome. Okay. Now I'm going to increase the exposure. I think on this one, it was about 3. And you're starting to, if I did a little look dev, you would see it. But there is a problem with this image, and I'll give you a second to sort of see if you can notice it. The problem with this image is that it is definitely recording the HDR in its reflections of this particular shader ball. But do you notice that there's no reflection in the basketball court? We're going to apply a texture, even though it's a holdout right now. Therefore, it doesn't really have a texture. We're going to apply a texture so that the reflections are more accurate. So why don't we do that step next? This is what grounds the image in reality. So we're going to create a PXR surface. I'm going to call this projection shader, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be camera projecting inside of Renderman, camera projecting the back plate onto that plane from the perspective of the camera, so that the reflections that come off the shader ball are accurate. So why don't we do that? We'll dive in. We need the first node. By the way, this is the reason that we need all that sensor information, is for this part of the tutorial. You'll notice I haven't really spoken about it that much. I mentioned it right here when creating the camera. We needed the focal length, but now you're going to see why we need everything else. So I'm going to just plug into the color channel, and this is where we tell it what background plate we need. And I'm going to use a TEX file. Again, it's Renderman, so you got to convert it. This, in a sense, this is almost like a PXR texture kind of a node. You can look at it that way. A little bit more fancy. Okay? Has a little bit more features. And that's all we need from the projection layer node. But now we need the manifold, which is called PXR projector. And this is a manifold. So let's plug into the manifold. And we need to set where the camera is in 3D space right now, the coordinate system for the camera. And luckily, FSPY already had created a null when I imported the data. So there it is. And now I know that my images are 2048 by 1536. I know the focal length is 5.42. By the way, this resolution would be the resolution of your image. Okay? Your background plate. Now, the horizontal aperture and the vertical aperture, these are the dimensions of the sensor. Now, remember I said that my sensor was 705 by 4.70. The problem with that is in millimeters. My sensor is in inches. And Renderman only understands inches here. So 7.05, let me keep this on top. 7.05 is 0.2775, and 4.70, the equivalent is 0.1850. That is in inches. That is all we need. I'll move that across. I need to apply this texture, or the shader, excuse me. And we are now ready to render again. And there it is. Look at right here. It's reflecting exactly what it sees. And I can move, that's the beauty. I can now move. Again, I'm going to have to make this smaller. I'm really sorry, just because I only have a 4K to play with. My monitor is ultra widescreen, but it becomes really unwielding to do a screen capture at widescreen, so I do it at 4K. But as you can see, I'm moving this image around. Watch when I cross the green line. It's right there. That is actually reflecting the green line in real life. And that's it. That's all there is to this tutorial. It's really, really a simple workflow. The most complicated part is the prep work. You have to get the sensor information correct. Okay, and I'm gonna have to create the shadow, the unoccluded, actually I'm gonna make this occluded and this unoccluded. Okay. And I'll be providing the LPs here. They'll be in the project file that I'm going to give you, but the LPs for that. And then you would not use these here. And you need this again when we do the denoising. And I think this will be fixed most likely in 27. I hope. But yeah, we'll have the LPs here. There's the shadow. There's the holdout. Oh, the occluded, excuse me. And here's the unoccluded. All right. And I've unchecked and now using these. And if I run the IPR, we get the same results. It still works. So, didn't want to spend a whole bunch of time, but I forgotten to include these LPEs in my preparation for the video. So forgive me for taking a little bit of time to do that, but it's important. Okay? And that's it. That's all there is to it. You can put anything in here. And because you have the HDR, your lighting is just, I mean, I'm using one light. That's it. And, you know, there are things you can do. I can change the temperature if I wanted to, although I wouldn't do it here. And at least not too much. But I could. Now I'm changing the temperature. Look how much effect it has on the metal. Of course, it doesn't affect the image display. This background, again, image display filter, that's all it's doing is just displaying a background plate, which is not influenced by anything the renderer does. Okay? Awesome. There you go. Cool. So, with all that said, I hope this is a lot of information to take in, but I hope that you learned something. And if you have any questions or anything, please leave them in the comments below. I'll be including links to all the stuff discussed so that you can get easy access to it. And I will be including the project file so that you have something to play with. All right? So have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon. We'll see you soon.